welcome to the Let's Examine Addiction Honestly podcast. My name is Charles. Today we will be going over addiction in general, kind of looking at it. I want to go over the different types of addiction that I feel relate to my life, and then kind of go over to my connection with them. So like the first podcast will be a little information heavy, I guess I'd say, going over what I find out about it, because looking through the different ones for nicotine and alcohol, there were a lot of things I actually didn't understand or realize. So it was interesting to look through those and see the different effects on the body, like why you drink, stuff like that. So we're going to be doing a few different podcasts like that, and then the one following it right afterwards will be kind of my stories related to smoking, drinking, stuff like that. So please stick around if that sounds good to you. Also, please understand that I am not a trained professional, and you should not use this podcast as an alternative to proven medical methods such as AA, NA therapy, rehab, or anything like that, because those will be far more beneficial to your well-being in the long run, as this podcast should just be a little bit more informative and kind of a way to connect with other people, and myself included. So let's get started on this. I ended up looking, and the American Addiction Centers states that addiction is a chronic health condition characterized by compulsive substance-seeking behavior and use despite the harmful consequences, which is so obvious once you read it, but not so obvious while you're doing it, especially with smoking. I smoked for so long, and it took so many tries to quit, and I knew the health risks and even felt some of them at some point, like getting winded, being on edge, yet still continued to do it even when I'd throw packs away and try to quit in the past. And the National Institute of Drug Abuse kind of summarizes it similarly. Addiction is defined as a chronic relapsing disorder characterized by compulsive drug seeking and use despite adverse consequences. So both explanations explain exactly why it was so easy for me to reach for a drink without thinking about it, such as when I would game or watch a movie, I'd find myself going and pouring a drink or cracking open one, yet being by myself, not in a social setting, not really any reason to drink. I mean, outside of that, it kind of loosens me up. So if I'm playing a multiplayer game with like a friend, it kind of helps loosen me up and make me a little more chatty, because honestly, before doing this in my other podcast, I really was not a social person. This is even pretty hard for me to do, honestly. Even my video game channel that I have, where I kind of do little tutorials for the different games I play and things that I find where I don't understand, all are way outside of my bubble, and usually something I would use alcohol to kind of limber me up for. And this even would roll over into when I'd hang out with family, regardless of knowing if there was like gonna be a hangover the next day, just because I'm not very social and I like to hang out with my family, obviously, but I also want to not be absolutely boring staring at my phone the whole time. So I definitely used alcohol so much to get outside of that bubble and kind of interact and talk and have a good time, even when it would take a negative toll on my body. And I never really realized that it was considered like a brain disorder or a chronic disease. It just didn't feel like that way to me while I was drinking or smoking. It's just one of those things where, especially smoking, you just compulsively do it. I'd go out and hang out with my friends and have a cigarette and chat with them, and it wasn't one of those things where I exactly saw that it was an addiction or it was like a medical related type situation, even though obviously looking back it blatantly was. And that's because it involves like functional changes to the brain circuits involved in the risk, reward, stress, and self-control systems, which makes so much sense now that I was looking into it. And I learned that on this similar point, it is preventable and treatable, but not curable. So you can work towards, AA, NA. You can work at treating it and preventing use, but you are never going to be cured of it. That's why I was looking up different things, and I stumbled across somebody who was explaining they bought this new liquor that's out. He goes, I'm 2 years sober, but I bought this to put on my shelf to show it off. And most of the comments, probably like half of them, were that's not a good idea, because it's not. If you're trying to quit drinking, it is extremely bad just to have that temptation there. It's the same reason why, since I've quit smoking, I don't keep, I always thought about how funny it'd be to have like a sealed pack of cigarettes in case of the zombie apocalypse when I smoke. I don't have anything like that because I know it'd be far too easy for me to have a bad day, go and open that pack of cigarettes and be right back on that same train. So people were honestly telling him that it wasn't an idea and he wasn't having any of it. So always remember that every day that we work on it, you're working to prevent that relapse and that you'll never be fully away from the temptation and the cravings. I mean, there's still, even over a year after quitting smoking, there are still days where I get super cravings and then just kind of have to figure out a way to put them out of my mind, honestly. And if you've fallen into addiction, you shouldn't feel bad on yourself. I saw so many things that pointed towards that we don't live in a perfect world, that anyone could fall into addiction for any various reason. Even like Elon Musk or any other super wealthy person, politician, anything can fall right into using and addiction. So I try to remind myself all the time that I know I wasted years with drinking and smoking and that I hate myself for it and the things I missed, but I also look at it like I did learn a lot from it and have tried to use it to kind of avoid those situations and work towards not being that same person that I don't like anymore. And while I could have taken another route, there is no point of sitting and dwelling on it and kicking myself in the behind saying that I could have been the next Elon Musk if I had pushed myself, because in all honesty, probably wouldn't have. Even if I had been motivated, I probably would not have been nowhere near that smart and achieved any of the things he did. And there's no point of dwelling on even if I could have, even if I could pinpoint that one moment where I could have been a super billionaire and the wealthiest man on the planet. There's no point of trying to kick myself in the butt for it now. I already made my choice. I'm a man. I'm an adult. I made the choice I did. So just remember, as far down as you've gone, just remember there's always a way to come back. You can always make changes to your life. You can always seek to better yourself and better the world around you and just make up for the things, that you've done. That's what I try to do. That's why I try to be like a good person. I'm not perfect. I still have my bad days, but I definitely want to be a better person than I used to be. And so what did I find that causes addiction? I did find a lot of stuff that talks about biology, especially that the genes people are born with account for almost half of a person's risk of addiction. The American Addiction Centers state that they found evidence that it's about a 50% chance of being predisposed to alcohol use disorder, which makes so much sense as there are so many alcoholics in my family. Granted, I'm not going to blame any of them. I used to want to blame my dad and blame other people for it, but that's just not appropriate. I'm the one who made the choices I did. There's no point of trying to push that off on them. And I also found that environment was a pretty big one. There's different influences from family, friends, economic status to the quality of your life. These factors also take into account peer pressure, physical or sexual abuse, early exposure to drugs and stress, even lack of parental guidance can greatly affect someone's likelihood to use drugs. Even taking these two into account, taking drugs at any age could lead to addiction and or not lead to addiction depending on what type of personality you have. Like if you have an addictive personality, but the earlier that drug use begins, the more likely it is to progress into hardcore addiction, especially if you're at the impressionable age where your brain's still developing, which makes it super problematic for teens. Thankfully, I didn't have my first drink until I was 17, and then first cigarette was at 18. Still not good, since everything I've ever heard, men generally mature around the age of 25, so that means I will put years of hard use on my brain. So that probably has not been beneficial in any way and probably set me back a long ways. But now I know, and if I could change it, it'd definitely go differently, but there's no reason to dwell on that. Which also helps explain a lot of the bad decisions I made, that alcohol really affects your brain and your decision-making, judgment, and self-control, which being that young in my late teens definitely explained a lot of my risky behaviors that I will go over in this podcast, a lot of the super stupid things I did. So I will have a lot of stories to share about that. I also found out that there are a lot of obvious reasons and not so obvious reasons. Some people use drugs to feel good. They get that dopamine where you use that substance and it just kicks off your brain, and you use a stimulant or alcohol. It'll give you feelings of power, self-confidence. It'll make you feel like you're on top of the world. It'll relax you. It'll do all them different things that affect your brain to kind of puts you in that better, I say that in quotes, better headspace. It's not better for you, but it kind of opens you up to different things, even though they, in the most part, are risky behaviors. Some people also do it to feel better, such as people who are suffering from anxiety, stress, depression. These different drugs help with that. I know drinking has always really helped with anxiety and stress, honestly, but then also added to them after that. And it is a depressant, so it really doesn't help with depression. If you're depressed and then drinking, it's not going to help you at all for the most part. It might in that moment where you're getting in touch with your emotions, but then the next night you're just going to have to kind of like match that, especially if you are drinking every night. And there have been times in my past where I thankfully was by myself. I just had my dogs. I'd drink and then come home, and most nights didn't take too much of a toll on my life. It did lead to some chaos, which I'll go over definitely, but it was a way where, especially during my stressful jobs such as the military and law enforcement, that it just kind of shut my brain down at the end of the day and kind of numbed all them emotions and stress from the day. I also did find information on people using it to do better, such as sports, focusing on school, stuff like that. I've never really used it for that. I never used, Adderall to kind of like study and stuff like that. So I don't really relate to that one at all, but I do definitely relate to curiosity and social pressure, especially being in law enforcement. We'd go out and have drinks at the end of the night after work, and it was related to a lot of the activities we did. If we went fishing, if we do anything, just the people at work, we were all so stressed out that it was one of those things. There was even one time I was in the military and we went and had shots on our lunch break while we were up at the motor pool. We walked over across the street to our barracks rooms and had shots, and then went back over to do whatever we were doing at the motor pool. It wasn't driving or anything like that. It was a boring day, but still, it was one of those things where definitely not the brightest idea, but it was just that social thing where my friends recommended it, and I was like, yeah, why not? I'll get on board. Which heavy use like that also relates to a lot of the health issues that it causes later on down the road. I did find, both for smoking and drinking, just a huge number of health issues. A lot that I honestly knew, and then there were a ton that I had no idea about. Like cirrhosis of the liver, I obviously knew about, but in like looking at it, it's one of those things where it's irreversible, but I found out that you actually can prevent further progression by stopping alcohol. So if you've damaged your liver and stop drinking, it generally won't progress, from what I found. So I definitely want to look more into that, because that was super informative and actually very interesting. And so how are we going to look at addiction on this journey? I kind of want to look at everything. I mean, not even just my own things. I know I want to examine the different types of addiction. I know I've had like nicotine, alcohol, caffeine's one. Technology is, oh my gosh. I've been mad at myself lately just because of how bad I don't know if it'd be compulsion just to like get on my phone and like look at different social media, but it's one of those things where I don't even realize I'm doing it half the time, and it's one of those things where I'm looking into ways to help stop, such as using the grayscale on my phone. I heard that kind of shuts off the endorphins you get from technology, so I've been trying with that, and it seems to be kind of helping a bit, but I've never been a big gambler, so I don't know about that. I don't know about hardcore drugs. I'd like to look at maybe like psychedelics and any scientific research people have done, because I've heard there's been great progression with those, and I'll go over a few stories about what I know about them. I also want to look into, as I said earlier, the different health effects it has and how it affects the lives of not only addicts but their family. I want to go over ways that there have been found that help fight addiction, and ones that can help people stay sober and help with relapses and coming to terms with them and losing the family and friends. I know when I stopped drinking super heavily and most of my friends had gone to jail or prison, I didn't really have many friends left that didn't drink. My roommates, and they're some of my best friends, but I lost a huge portion of my friends, especially when I left working at the prison, because I don't know, a lot of the places I work, I'm not a very social person, so I don't really go up to anybody and start hanging out with them. So I kind of lost all my friends and just became kind of I guess a hermit. So if this sounds good to you and you want to follow me on this journey, if you want to be a co-host, please reach out to me. If you have any suggestions or topics, please email them to the letsexamineaddictionhonestly at Gmail or the lethepodcast at Gmail. You can also send any feedback about the podcast or your personal stories and help me grow this podcast, because I definitely like to connect with other addicts and see, how they stay sober, what you've done, your different experiences in life, because it may be hard to talk about, but it might help somebody. You might end up helping another person overcome their own battles. That's kind of my goal with this podcast, is to put my stuff out there and it hopefully help at least one person know, they're not alone, that the mistakes they've made don't define them, that you can come back from all the stupidity that you think you've done. You're never alone. You're never fully defined by that, and you can try to repair some of those bridges. So my takeaways from this episode have definitely been that addiction just has so many factors and variables, especially when it comes to my own life and just all the stuff I've gone through, and it just has affected my life in such a big way that I definitely want to go over the different things and the different addictions I've encountered, the things that I've dealt with, and then try to come to understand these things, because I haven't been tempted by hard drugs or been a super hard gambler, but I've watched people succumb to both. I've watched family, friends gamble their entire paychecks away and lose houses, and they don't even touch drugs or alcohol. And then I've watched somebody use a hardcore drug and then, go and make mistakes and risk their children's safety and their own safety, just doing absolutely reckless things. And I won't state that I'm better than someone who's used hardcore drugs. Not at all. I've done alcohol and I've done very regrettable things. Thankfully, never injured anyone, but especially when I got my DUI, it could have happened, and I think about that every day. And I've wasted huge parts of my life, especially when it came to my siblings when they were younger. And so I kind of want to just figure all this stuff out and go over it. So I want to thank you so much for listening to my rambling. I truly appreciate you stopping by. Please subscribe, send any email any information you want in. And as always, remember what Alan Watts says: you are under no obligation to be the same person you were 5 minutes ago. Thank you so much for listening. Have a good day. Bye.